Hi, welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm going to give just about one more minute to see if anyone else is joining and just getting set with their audio, and then we will get started in just about 1 minute. Alrighty, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about complex business forms that you can create in just a matter of minutes using frevvo's drag and drop form and workflow designers. My name is Megan. I'm part of the frevvo customer success team, and I'll be taking you through the demo today. I also have on the line with me Will, and he will be helping to answer your questions as we go. So just a quick overview. If you're not familiar with GoToWebinar, you should have a panel on your screen with a little questions box. You can type in your questions at any time. Will either answer them by chatting back to you, or we may answer them live on the webinar as well. So please put your questions in there. We're going to start today with a quick overview of what frevvo is all about for any of you that might be new to frevvo. Then we'll go through a demo of building an expense report that has some fairly complex, business logic and behavior in it that we can actually build just in the time it takes to run this webinar, just 30 minutes or so. And of course, we'll be taking your questions. So if you're not familiar with frevvo, we are a simple workflow software. We help you automate and digitize your everyday business processes, administrative processes, educational processes, all kinds of things. Just about any workflow you can think of, we can do it. And one thing I love about frevvo is that you really don't need an IT department or a tech expert. If you're a basic business user and you can use things like Excel, you will be able to automate your processes with frevvo very, very easily. We do have a very large customer base across a number of different verticals. So we serve quite a few customers in the education space, K through 12 and higher ed. We also are working with several governments, so city governments, police departments, and then some other industries as well, other businesses. So frevvo has been used in all of these aspects. You'll probably actually see some logos you recognize on the screen there. And these customers are making their processes more efficient with frevvo every day. Now they use it, our customers use it for a number of different types of workflows. So everything from a new hire onboarding, which if you think about how that goes on paper, it's usually 5 or 6 or more paper forms that you have to fill out. Half of them have all the same information. And then they all have to get filed in a different place, or that data has to be manually input into some other database or system. With frevvo, you can automate all of that. Your user only has to input their information like name and address and social security number once, and frevvo will map it through to all the other forms. It will map it through to your custom PDFs, and it will allow you to file those forms directly out of frevvo into whatever database or file system where it needs to go. We also do things like approval workflows, like a purchase order that might need to route to a client and a manager for approval and then eventually get processed. And today we're going to be actually showing you an expense report. So you'll get to see an approval process in action. So we do offer a complete enterprise grade features. You can see a number of our favorite features listed on the screen. And today I'm going to be honing in on our drag and drop workflow and form designers. And this is what allows you to create that complexity with ease just by clicking your mouse and dragging and dropping things around. We'll also look at our business logic, which we have a visual rule builder that allows you to do that logic without having to write any code at all. Pretty great. And we'll also show you how we frevvo works on mobile devices. Again, this is a built-in feature, so it looks great on mobile devices without you having to do anything at all. So we're going to be, again, looking at our drag and drop designers, our point and click logic, other customizations you can make to the forms, like putting your logo on a title on it, and more. So we'll see what we can get into today. So let's, with that, pop out of our PowerPoint here, and we'll go right into our demo. So I want to start our demo today from a frevvo space. Now, a space is what you see on my screen here. It's kind of like a forms portal. So a lot of our customers use this. You can really brand it with your colors and your company logo. And I put a picture on the screen here. And then you'll have tabs across the top where your users can access forms that they have permission to see, and other important items like if you do a lot of workflows, this is where users can get to the steps of the workflow or tasks that they're assigned. They can edit their own personal account information, and they can see submissions that they have shared access on. So today we're going to run, and actually before I run this demo, let me really quickly, I'm going to share the mobile view here. Comes up. There we go. Okay, so you should see my, oops, where'd it go? There we go. You should see my phone view now on the screen. And this is what that space looks like on a mobile device. So instead of the tabs across the top, we actually have these little thumbnail icons. You can customize those. In fact, I added a custom one at the bottom for this demo expense report. I wanted to see that little receipt and calculator, so you can help your users find your forms easily on mobile devices. And if I click that expense report, I can actually see and fill out the form right here on my mobile device. And this is automatically responsive. I don't have to do anything at all to make it work on mobile device. This is built into frevvo. So kind of cool there. All right, let's stop that phone. And for the rest of the demo, I'm going to use the desktop view. I think it's just a little bit easier to see in the webinar. So we'll go ahead and we'll fill this expense report out. I'm adding my email address here. frevvo is automatically picking up my first name and last name, and it also has preset this IRS mileage rate, and I can't edit it, so I can't go finagle that and put it up to 60 cents and get a little extra for my mileage. That's predetermined by the designer. Now I'm going to set a period from and a period to date, and notice that if I set a period to date that's earlier than the period from, it's going to give me a little error message and remind me, oh, that this needs to be after my period from date. And then we have a table set up here for me to add my expenses. So we'll go ahead and we'll add some expenses. You can see when I do that, some calculations start happening and other fields start getting set. Let's say we drove 35 miles. Now notice that when I put in this mileage, it automatically multiplies the 35 times the IRS mileage rate and sets the amount. So I don't even have to think about, as a user, doing any math at all. frevvo is doing it all for me behind the scenes. As a finance department, when this routes forward, they won't have to think about double checking people's math. It's all going to be in there just fine, right? So then we'll do an airline ticket. And finally, we'll do a business dinner. So, whoops. We're gonna spend a lot on dinner, guys. And then you can see that when I pick business meals, it requires me now to enter a few additional things like the location, the purpose, and any other attendees that were there, right? And then if I have gotten a cash advance or put some of this on my corporate card, I can enter that amount here. And the final balance due is automatically adding the amounts minus the cash advance and putting that balance due there. And again, not editable because frevvo is doing the calculation for us. Then we have this read-only message control here that is actually calculating and displaying how much I spent in each category. So that can also be really helpful to kind of see how it breaks down. Now I can also add receipts. So if I come over here, I can grab a receipt off my computer. If I was on a mobile device, I would be able to actually take a photo of my receipt right from this dialog and upload it directly to the form. Super helpful to be able to use this when you're out in the field. You know, right there at the dinner table, take a picture of your receipt. So then I go ahead and sign it, and we're going to send this forward to the manager. Now, in a real world scenario, this would email the manager and they would have a link to click and perform the step. But for the demo today, I just have this set up so we can see all the steps in one screen flow. So the manager can see all that information that was entered, and he now has the ability to edit this status column. So perhaps he did not approve this expensive business dinner. He can actually deny that expense, and notice that automatically the balance recalculates, right? Then he can check this box to send it forward to the CFO. And the CFO will see, again, the same information. They also have the ability to say, actually, I do approve this, and change it. They can say reapproved dinner expense, and then sign the section and complete it. So you can see that really that form and has lots of different behavior that it needs to do behind the scenes and that it needs to do on each of the different steps. So now we're going to look at how can we build a workflow like that. So now you're seeing on my screen, I'm logged into frevvo as a designer user. So this is a special user with a frevvo.designer permission that can build workflows and forms. So the easiest way in frevvo and the fastest way to build a form is to use our installable templates. These are templates that frevvo's customer success team has pre-built for you with controls, business rules, customizations, and all kinds of cool stuff. So it'll save you time. So you would click install a pre-built template. You can actually search our list of, I think, 30 or 40 templates that are in here by keyword. You can preview that template to see if it is in fact the kind of thing that you want, pretty close to what you want to build. And then you can install it right from here. And when you install it, frevvo will actually give you a tour and walk you through everything you need to know about that workflow. So let's dive a little deeper. Let's look inside this workflow and see what it's all about. I'm going to close the tour and I'll just give you a tour live here. So you can see we have a 3-step workflow. We also have this yellow decision point where we can either send it to the CFO if a CFO review is required, or we could skip that step and just finish after the first 2 steps. And then if we dive one layer deeper into the form, we're going to see all of those customized controls and how they were built here in frevvo. So if you're installing a template to start, this is you can really see some nice design styles and how the frevvo customer success team visualized this process. But if there are things that don't meet your business needs, you can delete them. So for example, perhaps I don't need this message control. If I click on it, I can click the little minus icon to remove it, and it'll disappear from my form. I can also edit controls in a template. So for example, the first and last name are auto-filled. If for some reason I didn't want to do that, I could actually check this enabled and allow the user to fill that in. So we'll look at these properties in a little more detail in just a moment, but bottom line is you can move controls, edit their properties, delete them, add more, whatever you want to do inside of a template. Once you install it, it's all yours to play with as you would like. So with that, we're actually going to close our template. And I'm going to show you how you can build a fairly complex workflow from scratch. Let's say none of the templates really met your needs, or you just are someone who likes to start from scratch. In frevvo, what you will do is click this blue plus icon and click Create a New Workflow. You can then give that workflow a name, any name that you want. And you can also give it a description. Now, the description text is searchable later on. So if you're like me, you'll end up having dozens or even hundreds of forms and workflows, and it's really helpful to have some keywords in your description to search by when you're looking for this form down the line. So then we're in our workflow design wizard. This allows us to quickly create our steps and assignments. So I'm going to name my first step expenses, and we'll let frevvo create a new form for us. If I had other pre-built forms in my project, I would be able to add them from this drop-down, but I do not at this time. We'll name the second step manager, and this is going to be an approval step, meaning it'll be a copy of the first step with a little approval section so the manager can sign it. And I'm going to assign this to a user and then select my own user from the drop-down here. And finally, I will add a finance role for the finance department to process this. We'll assign that, in this case, to a role of finance. Now, there's a lot more you can get into in terms of workflow patterns and workflow design, but today I really want to focus on drilling down to the form designer itself. So to get there, from my workflow, I go to this guided designer navigation bar at the top and I click Forms. And this pops me right into my form editor. On the canvas in the middle of the screen are all my controls, and you can actually see that frevvo magically added some controls for me when I created that workflow. So it added this My Items section, which gathers some user information. And it also added approval sections for the manager and the finance. And these sections have a legally binding authenticated signature. So the manager, if they will be logged in when they perform this step, and they'll be able to click this button to sign the form, and that will be a PKI encrypted legally binding signature. So very, very nice feature that frevvo offers there. So from here, I want to do a few customizations. So first thing I'm going to do is take this My Items section and I'm going to rename it to Expenses. Now, in this case, I'm going to change actually the label of the section that the user sees to Expenses, but I'm going to leave this name field that you can see on the left side as My Items. And the reason I'm doing that is that I happen to know that this section is referenced in a business rule. I can change it and then edit my business rule, but just for the purposes of demo, I want to keep my rules pretty nice and clean. So I'm going to leave that section name alone. So you can have a different label from the name of your control. The label, again, is what the user sees, and the name is what we reference in the submission document and the business rules. Now, I don't need this message control here, so I'm going to use the little minus icon to delete it. And that leaves me with my user information fields. Now, I am going to pre-fill those using a business rule. So they don't need to be required, so I can uncheck that required property. And they also don't need to be enabled. So we'll uncheck that, making them disabled so that the user can see their information populated, but they cannot edit it. We'll do the same thing on email here. And on date. Now, the manager ID is going to pre-fill the user's manager, which is a property you actually set up when you build your users in frevvo. You can set up kind of a reporting structure with the user that they report to. This is going to pre-fill, but so we don't need to edit it. We also don't need to see it, and we don't need to print it. We're just going to use that value to route this workflow, perhaps. And the next thing we want to do is add some of those fields to capture the expense information. So to add a field to frevvo, you open up this palette on the top left, and this has a list of all of the available controls that you can add to your form. So you simply click on one of them, drag it over to your form, and you can see a little green arrow popping up. That shows me where I can drop it. I'm going to drop it to the right of the date control. Since there's not enough space there, it pops it to the next line, but it picks up the same width and style of the control that was to the left of it. We'll call this the period from. And notice in this case, when I give it a label and then tab out, frevvo automatically names it for me, stripping any spaces or special characters. Now, this is an important control in our expense report, so we do want to make it required. And then notice also that it has this nice date picker property, which gives the user a calendar to pick from. And then I also just want to point out that with a date control, you can change the format that you display it in, and you can also toggle between date, time, or date time types of controls. So we'll add just one more date control here called period 2. We're going to configure that as required as well. And the next thing I want to add is that IRS mileage field. So for that, I'm going to grab a money control. Money is going to display the amount with 2 decimal places, similar to US money format. So we'll call this IRS mileage rate. Let's see. And we want to set a value in this that will show up every time someone uses the form, a default value, and that will be able to be used to calculate business rules. So the way to do that is to actually click inside the control here in the designer and enter the mileage rate, and that sets it as a default value. So this value will go into the submission document. It can be used in business rules. And since I don't want the user to edit it, I'll just disable it. Now we need a table to enter our expenses. So we'll grab the table control from our palette and drop it below the mileage there. And now the table comes with 3 columns, preset columns for you. These are all text fields, but you can easily add fields to the table and move them around and change their width and lots of cool stuff. So we're going to grab a date field for our expense date. Notice I can't drag it to the far left field, but I can drag it to the next one over and then scooch it using the red arrows. We'll call this date, and we'll just give it a slightly different name of expense date to differentiate it from our other date control. Then we're going to add a drop-down control. So frevvo actually offers several different types of selection controls. You have a drop-down and a radio, which offer a single selection. The checkbox lets the user select multiple values. And then the true and false control gives you just 2 Boolean options of true or false. And a combo box is a kind of a special type of dropdown where you can select from a list of frevvo users, a list of frevvo roles, or a list populated by a web service. And it allows multi-select in the sort of searchable dropdown option. So in this case, we're going to take a drop-down control and just add it next to our date control, and we'll call it category. And then when I click the first row of that table, this is where I can set the properties of that control. So notice on a selection control, I have this options area. So I'm setting the options with the syntax value equals label, value being what we use in business rules and pass into the submission document, label being what the user sees. Now I'm just going to paste in options from another form here, and you can see that the mileage, the value and label are slightly different. And that gives us our drop-down options. So you can even see those drop-downs right here in the designer to check and make sure you're happy with how they look. And then the next thing we want to add is a miles field. So for that, we're going to actually reuse one of these original text controls. We'll name it miles, and we're going to click into the first row and change this from a text input to a number input, which will accept any number, including decimal places. Then we'll add an amount column, again, reusing one of the original columns frevvo created for us, clicking into that first row and changing this to a money type field. And then in the last one, let's just do a notes column for regular text input. And in this case, we don't need to change the control type. Text will work fine. We're going to add just 2 more money controls into our form. Let's put it beneath the table. This one is going to be for cash advance. And if we don't want it to take up the full width of the screen, which is kind of a lot of space for just a money control, we can click over to the Style tab and change how it looks and how it appears on the screen by, you know, if we imagine this canvas split into 12 columns, then this little width picker will let you pick how many columns wide you want the control to be, and frevvo will help arrange it once you set the width. We'll add 1 more money control. And this is going to be the total due. And for this one, we're going to calculate it using a business rule, so we'll disable it for the user. The very last thing I want to add is an upload control to, well, maybe it's not the very last thing, but the next thing I want to add is an upload control. This is going to allow the user to upload their receipts. So we'll call this attach receipts here. And then notice on this control that we have that enable camera checked. So if we're using it on mobile, they can take a photo with their phone and attach that directly to the form. We can also edit the file name. So right now we're using a special template that just picks up whatever file name, you know, the file was named on the computer when you uploaded it. You can also add static text like the word receipts and dynamic text using these curly brackets to reference controls in your form. So maybe I want to say, you know, receipts last name, and that's going to pick up whatever last name is entered at runtime and set it in the file name. You can also restrict what type of file can be uploaded, the file size, and how many files are allowed to be uploaded. If we wanted to make this required, we would set the minimum to 1 or more. If you wanted to require a minimum of 3, you can do that as well. So I did want to do one other thing. One thing I actually really like to do is make this form have our logo and a title on it. So you can do that with frevvo using an image control. So we take an image from the palette and we'll drop it up here. We'll choose a file from our computer, stick it in there, and upload. Now this has taken up a lot of space on my screen, so I'm going to change the style, set it to just 3 width across, so it's a little bit smaller, more manageable. And then to add my title, I'll take this special message control, which is a read-only type of control. I'll set it to take up the remaining width of the page. And then over here, I can toggle on the rich text editor, and that's going to open up kind of like a text editor, almost like a Word document, where I can type in whatever I want, and then I can format that text for, you know, the font, the style, the color, however I want it to look on my form. Now, I don't love having this little message icon on my title, so I'm going to change the message type to none. And then I will center that message on the screen. And if I want to center it vertically as well, I can just add a line break here in the rich text editor. So now we have a really nice looking form, but we still want to customize some of the behavior. So we'll go over to our business rule editor, and notice that frevvo added several business rules for us. This first one initializes the form with the logged in user's information. And then the next 4 will display and make required those approval steps on the right, the approval sections, I should say, on the relevant steps. So on the manager step, the manager will see his section as expanded, required, enabled. On the finance step, she will see her section. And otherwise, those sections will be invisible or collapsed so that they're not cluttering up your form for your users. Now we want to add a couple other business rules quickly here, and we're going to use our visual rule builder for that. So the first thing I want to do is to validate the from and to dates. So in order to do this, we will give it a name. We're going to then be on this rule builder tab and click run builder. So this is going to allow us to create logic without writing any code. we're going to add the condition that if the period to date is before the period from date, and notice that I can just kind of type ahead and frevvo will automatically find a list of controls that match my typing and let me select them. So if the period from date is before the, if the period to is before the period from date, then we want to set the period to date to invalid, meaning you won't be able to submit the form with the control like that. And here we could actually also customize the error message that shows. So I can say error text 2, I'm changing this to literal value so I can type in and say it must be on or after period from date, just to give the user a little more context and friendly information on how to use that control. And then we're going to click next, and this is where we set an else action. So what do we do if that condition was false? We would set the period to date to valid. So it's all good. As long as it's not before, it's valid. So then you click done, and you can see that this is kind of gives you a verbal description of what your rule is doing and a visual description. If you want to check out what the rule code is doing behind the scenes, you can click this rule code button to kind of see what the JavaScript behind the scenes looks like. And if you really wanted to edit it, you can click edit code, but that is a one-way operation. So if you're happy with your rule builder, go ahead and keep it in that mode. We're also going to validate the dates in our table are within the from and to date. So again, we can use our builder for this, and even though we are using controls that are inside of a table, the rule builder can handle that for us. So we're going to say when expense date is before period to, or no, sorry, before period from, or expense date is after the period to. So if it's outside of the bounds of those period dates, then we are going to do an action. But notice that our logic here is and. Well, a date could never be both before and after that period. So we want to change this by editing it, change it from the and logic expression to the or logic expression. And we'll click next. And we'll set that expense date to invalid. Else, if it falls within the bounds, expense date will be valid. Oops. Okay. So now we've got two business rules that just took us moments to create to validate these dates. Now, the next thing I want to do is if someone enters the category business miles, I want them to, I want to make this miles required, and I want to make amount disabled because I'm going to automatically calculate it based on the IRS mileage rate. If they pick anything else, I want to make miles disabled because they don't need it, and amount required. So let's go ahead and build a rule that does all of those cool things. We'll just call it mileage. And we'll run the builder. We'll say when the category is, let's see, mileage, I believe is the value we gave that. So here in the literal value, we have to enter the exact value of the option for that dropdown. So it's good to kind of know that. You can also use your form outline, which I'll show you a little later to get that value if you're not quite sure. So if the category is mileage, we want to set the miles field to enabled and required. We want to set the amount field to a value, which is going to be miles. And again, you can see it's catching that control right from my form. Miles multiplied by, so I'll use the little star, the IRS mileage rate. So this is just a very simple arithmetic expression here that the rule builder can handle. And we'll also set, in that case, the amount to disabled. Okay, Now we want to add an else action. So if it's any other category that's not miles, we want to set miles to optional. We also want to set miles to disabled. And just in case someone maybe entered some miles and then changed their mind and changed the category, we also want to empty out that miles field at this point. So we can set it to empty using our rule builder. And then at the same time, we're going to set amount to enabled and amount to required. So you can see that we can dynamically control all of the properties that I showed you on the designer earlier based on a condition at runtime in your form. Cool. All right, one more really quick calculation is we're going to do up the total here. So the total due is going to be, now in this case, we don't need a condition. We're just always going to calculate that total due. So we'll say that the total due is, meaning we're going to set it to a value. We're going to use another arithmetic expression here. We're going to do the sum of the amount minus the cash advance. And we'll finish. Now, if you want to check rule code, especially when you're writing a rule about a control that's in a table, check your rule code and notice that our business rule automatically runs this rule anytime something is added or removed from the table, and it loops over the table to gather the amounts and set that total. So it does some fancy stuff behind the scenes, but from your perspective, that was really a one-liner, a very, very easy rule to calculate. And then if we run that form, we should see very similar behavior to what we saw in the demo form in terms of the business logic behavior, right? So we can pick a period from. If we pick a period to that's out of bounds, it gives us our error message. If we pick a date that's out of bounds, we get the error. Now I'm having trouble picking a date that's inbound. There we go. If we set the category to business miles, miles is required. It automatically is calculating based on the mileage rate. And if I pick anything else, miles is disabled and amount is required. So then we're automatically calculating this total due, and if I put a cash advance there, that calculates as well. So we did all of that really in just about 10 minutes, all of those calculations, and now forevermore, you don't have to do any math. Lucky you. Now, I'm gonna flip back here to our original template that we were looking at. Here. So this is the installable template that we pulled in from Frevvo. Now it had a little bit more complexity than what we built just now. In terms of, for example, it had this status column where at a later step the manager could perhaps deny an expense, and then the balance due would calculate that as well. So for that, I'll just show you this, the way we did that business rule is we took the original rule that we built with the rule builder to calculate the total, and then we clicked edit code. So we did that one-way operation so we could go in and edit the JavaScript, and we added this if statement. So this is going to run that rule only if the status value equals okay. So we did kind of a little added complexity there, but again, we really were able to bank on what Frevvo has built in and then just add a little bit to it. And another cool thing that this form does is it had that display control, the display message that shows you your expenses by category. So that's another example where we used the JavaScript editor to loop over the amounts wherever the status was okay, add it to a variable that kind of calculates the amount by category, and then we used some HTML to set the value of that message control to a bullet point list that has each category with the category's amount. So again, all these calculations are fairly simple and happening behind the scenes. And if you're not super comfortable in JavaScript, which I will tell you, I am not, what you can do is start building a rule with the rule builder and then switch to code. So you let frevvo do some of the work for you. And you can also go to the frevvo documentation has a page called rule examples. And this page has dozens of example rules, some in the rule builder, some in JavaScript, just about anything you can imagine. You can come here and just copy the rule code that frevvo offers and paste it into your business rule, and then just make a small change like the name of your control. I did want to show you, if you do happen to be writing one of these more complex rules, you have a form outline here that shows you all of the all of the control names, as well as any properties that are available to them. And the rule builder itself, let me just type into this rule, will let you, it will sort of pre-populate some of those properties for you. So let's say I put this report date in here and then a period, and it's showing me all the available properties on this control that I can write a rule about. So the rule, even the rule editor, helps you out a lot with writing this JavaScript. You definitely do not need to be an expert. And most of your rules, you can see almost all of the other rules on here are all from the visual rule builder. So super easy to create. All right, so that is pretty much what I wanted to show you. All those ways you can customize and create these really pretty complex forms in just a matter of minutes. So, Will, did we have any questions that we can answer now?
Yeah, we have two questions. The first one is, how would you route an approval based on data in the form? For example, if one person approves purchase orders below a certain amount, another one, sorry, I'm trying to read, above a certain amount. So
Right?
I think it's, yeah, so if you have a step.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few ways to do dynamic routing. So if I look over here at the one we were building, one thing you can do is you can actually route to a user ID that you set in the form. So in this example that we built, we're automatically pulling in the user ID. And then in the workflow, what I could do is set the manager step to assignment. Instead of to a hard-coded user, I would use these open curly brackets to set it to that control in the form called manager ID. So now whoever runs this form, this is going to route to their manager. So if you wanted to do something where it was one manager if it's below $400 and a different manager if it's over $400, what you would do is in a business rule, set this manager ID based on the total amount. So you'd write a business rule that says if total amount is less than $400, route it to Jerry, or set manager ID to Jerry. If it's over $400, set manager ID to Sue, and then you would use that manager ID control in your assignment. So that's one way to do it. Oops, I guess I did not save this when I did that. Another thing that you can do that I will show you actually on our template that we installed is you can add a precondition. So in this case, the manager is always going to approve step 2, but the CFO only needs to approve if that CFO checkbox is checked. And this really could be, this precondition could be anything. So we could say if the grand total is more than $1,000, it needs to go to the CFO. So in some cases, you might just route one particular step one way or the other, or you might have a step in your form that you either perform or don't perform based on a condition.
Okay, sounds good, Megan. And then we only have one other question, which was, how do you design a form for other devices? Earlier, we saw a form on a phone that looked completely different.
Yeah, so what you can do is all frevvo forms are automatically responsive, meaning they will show up nicely on any device. So in test mode here, I'm seeing the form in desktop mode. And I can also preview that form by clicking the tablet here at the top. I can preview what it will look like on a tablet. So it looks a little different, but you have really all the same controls. And I can also preview it on a phone to see how it looks there. Now, even though the form is automatically responsive, there are some design considerations for mobile. So for example, in our expense report, we have this table, which is like kind of a horizontal layout. So on a phone, you actually have to scroll up and down and then sideways across the table. One consideration there might be to use a repeat control in frevvo, which our tables and repeats are actually interchangeable. So for example, I can change this table to a repeat. And now each of those rows shows in more of a vertical layout. So now if I test the form, this might look just a little bit better in the mobile device. So that's just a consideration. You can also add page breaks to split up longer forms on mobile devices, but now I don't have to scroll across. Everything is laid out vertically for me. But yeah, everything really happens automatically for the phone, for the device.
Okay, well, that's all we had for questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We did record this webinar, so we'll send it out to you probably early next week. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. If you go to www.frevvo.com, which you probably did to sign up for this webinar, and then click the contact button at the top, this is a great way to get a hold of us if you'd like to learn a little bit more, ask a question, or get a custom quote. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.